Welcome to In the Fire, a podcast for the young families of Chapelgate Presbyterian Church. Marriage and parenting are a wonderful blessing and are extremely rewarding, but they're also really hard and can leave us feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, and defeated. That's exactly why we started this podcast, to help families see how the gospel injects encouragement, comfort, and hope into the daily grind of our lives, and to remind you that you're never alone in the struggle. There is another in the fire.
Welcome back to In the Fire. My name is Rob Gicking, pastor of young families here at Chapelgate Church and illustrious host of this podcast. And by illustrious, I just mean average. But here I am anyway, and today I am joined by my dear friend from Philadelphia, Ducky. Now, Ducky, before you introduce yourself, I want to know how you got such a dumb name.
That's a fair question. I am number 2 of 4 boys, and my name is Derek. That's my hospital name. And my older brother couldn't say Derek when I was born, so he said Deck. Turned into Duck over time, and people just call me that my entire life.
Well, that's very sad. But I'm glad that you're dealing with it. You're steering into the skid, as they say.
It's a legal nickname at this point.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's pretty cool.
Yep.
So, it's not because you look like a duck.
Yeah, I guess I walk weird.
You kind of smell weird too. So maybe it was more of a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing.
Do ducks smell like breadcrumbs? Because that's all I see them eating.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know. You are what you eat. Who could say these things? I've never gotten close enough to a duck to smell one.
Just a big loaf of Wonder Bread.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Well, Ducky, you and I have been friends for a while now. I'm very excited to have you on the podcast. We met at something called the Timothy Foundation, which our mutual friend John Ireland, who is a Chapelgate guy himself, dubbed the Christian Illuminati. And that's exactly what it felt like when we first showed up, right? Because I guess I should start with this. The Timothy Foundation is a nonprofit out of like the Pennsylvania area. They are a group of guys who kind of mentor younger Christian leaders, both in business and in ministry. And so we were invited to attend like a tryout weekend, and I didn't know Ducky, and Ducky didn't know me, but you know what they say, crazy attracts crazy. So here we are. But now for many years,
Beyonce host something.
Yeah, that's basically us. We don't have to tell who's who in that story. We both have beards, so
bearded and baggy-eyed. It's a lifestyle.
Bearded and baggy-eyed. Well, listen, Ducky, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do for a living, and then I'm going to ask you what I ask every podcast guest, which is a hard-hitting question.
I actually couldn't remember what those were from your last seasons, and I was like, I wonder if I'm going to get a question about waffles or something. But yeah, my name is Derek Ducky Ryan. I'm a real estate agent. I'm expecting my first baby in July, and we just found out it's a boy.
Wow, dude, that's so exciting. That is so exciting. How long have you been married?
It'll be 7 years in June, and we just had our 12th year anniversary of being together. So we've been together since we were pretty young.
Man, she's a special lady to deal with you for that long, that's for sure.
I'll tell you what, you're not wrong.
So, Ducky, it's time for a hard-hitting question. I like to ask the hard-hitting question because I think what it does is it makes the rest of the podcast interview go pretty smoothly. So your hard-hitting question is this. I just want to start with some marquee statistics, okay? So, for example, I am 6 foot and about 230 pounds, and you are
5'8", 185 pounds.
Okay. Who would win in a cage match between you and me?
Are low blows involved?
I mean, with you being 5'8", I imagine that's all you can do. You probably just can't even reach up here, man.
I've never hit my head on anything.
No. That's not your hard-hitting question. We all know you would wipe the floor with me. Ducky, I want to know, okay, if you don't mind, if you could sing one song in front of like a crowd of like 30,000 people, what is the one song that you would sing?
It's a good question. First one that comes to mind is My Heart Will Go On from the Titanic.
Oh, what a ballad. Is there a reason?
I don't know. I like American Idol, and I saw somebody singing on there the other day, and now it's stuck in my head.
Or do you watch American Idol?
I watched the YouTube, like
Oh, the clips. Yeah, yeah.
like when you. I only like really the first one in front of the judges, and then once it gets to like Hollywood Week and all that stuff, it's not as entertaining to me personally.
So you like the tryouts? Like
Yeah, I like to feel all the feels, the stories.
I, yeah, I like The Voice. That's been a show that I've watched a little bit here and there. And lately, I've really been into The Masked Singer. I
Oh.
thought it was going to be really, really dumb, so I kind of watched it because I thought it was going to be dumb. But I'll tell you, it's even dumber than I thought, and I love every bit of it.
That's how I feel every time I watch Love Is Blind.
Oh, Love Is Blind. That is an irresponsibly garbage show. It is terrible. I like watch this, and we won't give away any spoilers, but I'm just gonna say it. It's a really bad show. Anyway, let's get on with the interview, Ducky. So you're in real estate, but that's not where you started. So why don't you tell us a little bit about after college what you were doing, and I want to talk a little bit today, or a good bit about work and calling, vocation. Obviously, we know that the world has a lot of wisdom for us when it comes to these things, and some of that is useful in as much as all truth is God's truth. But there's also a sense that as Christians, God calls us to live our entire lives for his glory and the good of others. And so sometimes we can overthink that and get into a place where it's only certain jobs that God smiles at or is happy for us to do. But I think what's interesting about your story as well as mine is that is just not true. So why don't we start a little bit, maybe go back. You graduated college. What were you doing for work out of college?
Yeah, I like the way you set all that up. I think in order to understand where I was, when I graduated college, it's kind of helpful to understand some of the stuff like during college. So I'll start like in college and then work out. So I went to school. I wanted to originally be an elementary school an elementary school teacher. First semester, I took some of those gen ed classes. I thought it was super boring. I didn't study or anything, and I was getting good grades. And I was like, it doesn't challenge me. And then I wanted to be a secondary ed history teacher, and the secondary ed like school stuff isn't what it is today, 10, 12, 15 years ago when I was looking to get into it. Nowadays they're clamoring for teachers, but in Southeastern PA, there's a whole bunch of universities, and being a white guy wanting to teach, World War II history stuff in Southeastern PA in a public school was going to be a really difficult job to get. So I ended up switching to psychology. So I studied psychology, Spanish, and biblical studies. And those were all just classes I took that I enjoyed. I like people. That's one of the things I've always really, really enjoyed is just being around others and building relationships and hanging out. And so I took a psych class, and the professor just made it really interesting. It was about people, like how do you understand and communicate with and get along with others. And I found it really interesting. So I took another class and another class. And before I knew it, here we are. I studied psychology and the Spanish. I just like Spanish. And then biblical studies, I was volunteering with a nonprofit called Young Life in college. So I started walking with the Lord probably like the very end of my senior year in high school. And I wanted to be a part of a ministry. And one thing led to another, probably another podcast, got into Young Life. And so I volunteered with Young Life for 6 years, 4 in college and 2 after college. So when I graduated, I had a ton of student debt, no real idea what I was going to do. During the summers and Christmas breaks and stuff like that, I worked for a tree guy, like an arborist through college. So when I graduated, I continued working with him, and I was living in somebody's basement. I had $600 to my name, and I had a $710 student loan payment. Was driving a 92 Toyota Corolla that caught on fire and kept driving it, and wanted to get married, couldn't afford a ring. And, it was wild. And some friends of mine from Young Life, they were selling their house with a local real estate team. And I was 21. This was like June, and I graduated college in May. And they said that these guys who they were selling their house with were looking to hire someone, and the description sounded just like me. and then I should look into it. So I did, and fast forward 10 years later, here we are. It's been a super wild ride, and real grateful for all of that. One of the things you talked about earlier, which maybe we can get into, is just kind of like how God guides our paths in the form of our careers and stuff. Because I think that really played a big role, like the in between portions of those like major timelines that I was thinking about. And yeah, so I'm sure we'll get into that too.
Yeah. Let's dive in actually and talk more about what drew you to Young Life, and did you ever at any point consider, working, in Young Life, which is a Christian ministry? Is that something that crossed your mind as you were trying to figure out what do you do?
Yeah. So probably by my like junior year in college, I didn't really have a ton of direction when it came to like what I wanted to do for a job. I don't know if you knew this, but Christian liberal arts degrees don't really get you a lot of real world job opportunities. And so uh, I remember there's a big corporate company near where I live called Vanguard. They like the wealth management company. And I went to an interview there. This is probably like my senior year in high school, and they politely told me I wouldn't fit in there. And I'm not a corporate guy. I crack jokes and answer emails for a living and hang out with people. And that was the best thing anybody could have ever told me, that I didn't fit in there, because I would have just died sitting behind a computer for 8 hours a day for however long trying to climb this corporate ladder. I couldn't do it. But so back to the Young Life thing. So I was volunteering with Young Life and realized that I could potentially have a job coming out of school doing ministry. And I really don't know how I got into Young Life exactly. I know that they needed leaders for this winter trip, and they told me I can go skiing and eat as much food as I wanted for free. I just need to hang out with high school kids. And I was like, that sounds great. And I taught them how to do a bunch of practical jokes, and we played pranks on other people. And
you're the kind of leader I hated as a youth pastor. I just want to say that.
But my kids loved me, man. We had a blast.
I bet they did.
I drove everyone else crazy. I was just hyped up on caffeine and freedom,
Yeah.
And one thing led to another. And I remember thinking about going on staff with Young Life when I graduated, but I had so much student loan debt that whatever they were making as you do a 2-year internship program, quote unquote, when you get into that ministry. So it's like, you might make like, I don't know, $18,000 to $24,000 a year. And my student loan payments were bigger than that, and wanted to get married and didn't want to live in that basement anymore. And my car was on fire. And I just didn't know what I was going to do. And as I was getting out of school, I remember talking to a few influential people in my life. There's a guy who's, I don't know if he is anymore, but he was a pretty big time name in the youth ministry world, named Ducky, who was a professor at Eastern University at the time where I went to college. And I remember sitting down with him, and I was like, hey, Duffy, like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, just do something. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you just got to do something. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. This is the worst advice anyone ever gave me. This man was a sage, by the way. Like, he knew. And then he actually gave me a book titled the same thing. I think
Kevin DeYoung. Yeah.
Kevin DeYoung. Yeah, it's called Just Do Something. And in that book, the analogy they compare it to is in life, when it comes to careers, it's kind of like a highway where you're going down it. Could be fast, could be slow, whatever. You take an exit. If it's not the right exit to get you where you want to go, you just get back on the highway and you keep going the same direction. And so as long as you're trusting the Lord through all of that, you're heading in a direction that you feel and trust and are being guided to go in. Sometimes opportunities pop up and you take those, but you get back on the highway and you keep going. So I remember having that conversation, just being super confused as a 20-year-old coming out of college. I had another year to go in school. And then this opportunity with real estate came up. I still wasn't sure if I was going to go on staff with Young Life. I was having conversations about that. I was thinking like, oh man, if I do that, I'll probably go back to school for a graduate degree in like organizational leadership or something like that. But that would have meant more student loans. Or I would go into the military hoping they would try to like forgive my student loans. And I don't even know exactly how that works, but those were how I was weighing my options at the time. And when the real estate thing came up and they said, you should look into this, I remember talking to the people I was doing Young Life with and a bunch of other mentors of mine, just kind of explaining. And they're like, hey, look, you never know They're like, if you're going to get into it, now's a good time to test the waters out. You're not married, you don't have a ton of extra responsibilities, and if it doesn't work out, you go through another door, kind of thing. So that was kind of how that process went. A lot of conversations, and I had the perspective that if I seek the Lord while I'm going into something, and if it seems right and He's guiding that, and if it stops working, I'll seek the Lord back out of it. But He was like always sort of in it with me. It wasn't like I was making this decision and then all of a sudden He left me or anything like that. I was trusting and seeking while I was making the decisions. And if they didn't work out, I would trust and seek out of that decision into something else. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I think that's, it's interesting. One of the things that I find, and it's the reason I find it in some sense is because it was a huge part of my story is I went to college. I didn't know what I was going to college for. I actually started up at Gettysburg, which is a small liberal arts school in Pennsylvania, and I was playing football. And I just kind of was like, I was there. I was in the engineering department, and I've always loved math. I loved the idea of engineering. And then I tore my ACL with a week left in the regular season. And so football was gone. And then I went from being like top of the class for engineering to like mid pack because all of a sudden we got off of like mass and vectors and things like that and started talking about these like quarks and leptons, which a lot of my friends around here in the Howard County area understand, but I'm still convinced that's just like made up. It's just like not a real thing at all. It's just somebody was like, you know what? I bet atoms have quarks and leptons. And I'm like, well, I bet Santa flies at 1,000 miles an hour. So if we're just making stuff up. But anyway, neither here nor there. But then I ended up transferring to Maryland, College Park, and could not pick a major to save my life. And so I ended up doing communication because really at the end of the day, it was something kind of like you with psychology. I enjoyed it. I was like, man, my brain thinks this way. I like the riddle and the puzzle that communications is solving. But I had no clue what to do with that. I have a friend, Josh, and he says, he got a communication degree as well. And he says, you know who else has a communication degree, Rob, besides you and me? No, who? He's Homer Simpson. So it's like, it's like, what are you going to do with this degree was sort of like where I was at. But I think all the while sort of feeling this, which later I realized was a false tension. It's a false dichotomy that my life needed to be spent doing something for the Lord. And so how do I both have a job and do something for the Lord? Can I even have a job and do something for the Lord unless that job is ministry, vocational ministry, working at a church, working at a mission, working as a missionary, things like that. And, sort of processing that through. And it sounds like for you, some of the clarity was just practical, circumstantial issues, student loan debt and other desires that God has put on your heart. And so for you, it seems sort of like you looked around, you said, well, what are some of the desires that I have? To get married, to no longer be living in a basement, maybe to get out of debt, and said, well, what can I do that's sort of up my alley, personality wise, which you've already alluded to, not being a corporate guy. There's a lot of people that are corporate people and it works out great for them. But I mean, obviously I'm with you. I'm a little bit on the wilder, draw outside the lines type person. And, that can be either very useful or very detrimental to a career path if you're in the wrong place. So tell me a little bit about how, from looking at your circumstances to taking that first step into real estate, how did you see God sort of guide you? What were the maybe some of the key moments that you felt like as you looked at your career, God said, yeah, you're on the right path, buddy?
Yeah. You just cracked me up, man. Because I'm thinking back to like getting into this, and I was just a raging extrovert going Mach 2 with my hair on fire, looking for a conversation to be had. Yeah, it's all good stuff. I really don't know all the stuff we're going to talk about today. Real estate has gone really well for me in a lot of ways. What people see right now doesn't really. I'll do my best to paint like a non super simplistic picture of like how I've got here. But it's really been a grind. It has been 80 to 100-hour weeks for 10 years. I work more than I should probably, and I truly, truly love it, right? And that's part of the hang up is like I've gotten good at it, but I really, really enjoy it. Yeah, so where have I kind of seen God guide me through it? So I didn't make a dime for the first 6 months I was in real estate. I think that's probably worth noting. So I worked for the tree guy during the day, And then I showed houses and ran around with clients nights and weekends for the first year. And my first year in real estate, I sold 2 houses. And the next year was, after I switched to doing it full time, was 24 houses. And then it was 47. And it's been over 50 every year since then. And it's one of those things that I think when you trust the Lord into what you're doing, I don't know. I really never saw like as another option. It wasn't like I had a bunch of options first off, but it wasn't that I even gave myself a second option. I had that like burn the ships mentality of like, I am going to do this, hell or high water. I'm going to make this thing happen. This is going to be a grind, like a grind. And I just was too stubborn or too dumb to think of smarter ways to do it. I just read the books they told me to read and did what they told me to do. And I just did it probably more consistently for a longer period of time than most people are willing to do it for before they give up. And so when you come out the other side of that, it tends to go pretty well in the real estate world. So yeah, how have I seen God through that? I really honestly probably see God the most in my clients, right? So I interact with people. When folks ask who I typically work with, I kind of jokingly say, I work with the 4 Ds of real estate: death, divorce, diapers, and downsizing. And, in each of those very transitional periods of people's lives, there's in some cases great joys, or in other cases, really great heartaches. I, work with a lot of people who had a family member pass away, like estates. And those can be really sad, like really sad. Like when you get a call from somebody that, somebody died in their house a week ago, and you have to go help them pick up the pieces of that, and they can't go in their house anymore because they're so sad. And I mean, rightfully so, I would feel the same way, to help them navigate that circumstance. That's pretty tough. I mean, I get kind of choked up just thinking about some of the situations with that. And in other cases, other sad things, a lot of divorces, really, really contentious, hard situations where there's a lot of emotional baggage and things that people have sort of worked through in their lives, and you sort of you intersect the situation like just right in the middle of it. And then you walk with people through that situation for however long of a period of time they allow you to be in their life. Sometimes it's just to help them sell the house that they were once in as a family. Sometimes it's you help them sell that house, and then you have to help each party buy a different house. And so you're involved with these folks for a long period of time. And then on the flip side, sometimes there's great joys. People buying their first house because they got married or got their first job, or, diapers, people having a growing family, they're having babies and they need a bigger spot. And those are hard too, but they can be a lot of fun, and, they're really, really joyous. And, my business is last year it was 97% referral based. And then the year before that, it was 93% referral based. And I don't do any marketing or advertising and stuff like that. It's really based on the relationships that I have with people, really being genuine and honest, and do my best to like put their needs before my own. And when you do that well for people for a long period of time, there's a lot of rapport and trust that gets built. And then people refer their friends and family to you as an agent, because they know you're not going to screw them over. You're not going to take advantage of them. You're not going to be dishonest with them. And in a lot of cases, that it makes a transaction harder as an agent when you look somebody in the eyes and you're like, I don't think this is the right thing for you. And there's been times I've shown people 75 houses in a 3-month period and wrote 15 offers for them to help them find a house, and they never buy. And that's okay. They end up renting because they just realize the market's too tough for them. And to look somebody in the eyes and tell them honestly, like, guys, I don't know if this is the right thing for you at this time. We're banging our head against the wall trying to make this work. Maybe we should like reconvene in a year and see if we can like come at this in a different way. It can be tough. I could, on the flip side, I see a lot of this where you can just blow smoke and kind of lie to people and say like, oh, you need to do this. And that's not what I want to do. I just want to take good care of folks. And that's kind of how it maybe got to where I'm at.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting as you're sharing this, because real estate is one of those areas that people's hearts are really on display. In America, especially, you think about how many people are living in homes that are probably certainly beyond their needs, right? Like, when you really boil it down to what do I need? I need a roof over my head. I need some protection from the elements. And, we're very blessed because we live in an area in the world where, there's not a lot of us who are fighting against needs so much as we're fighting against an ever growing set of desires. I want bigger, I want newer, I want nicer, I want updated, I want bigger privacy, I want more land, I want more convenience, better schools. And I think you have an opportunity to really walk people through some of these situations, and help them see that there's more going on here than they might realize. And you're also dealing with people at pivot points in life, and pivot points tend to be where we're most vulnerable, right? Like you're saying, those 4Ds those are life-changing moments. Those are moments in life where what was is no longer what is or what will be. Navigating those changes, those pivot points can be very, very anxiety inducing. I mean, I believe buying a house is one of the top 3 stressors in life. I think it's what is it? Marriage, death, and death of a family member, and buying houses. And there might be 1 or 2 more, but those are
it's like
huge
divorce
moments.
and babies are on that. Yeah. Divorce and babies are on that. Yeah.
And so, you're sort of implicitly saying a lot of this. I'm just helping pull it out for the audience here, which is you have an opportunity to walk alongside people through a process that can be very, very overwhelming, and produce a lot of anxiety, but to really serve them. And so, kind of going back to the gist of this conversation, where sometimes it can feel like, am I bringing honor to God by just doing a quote unquote job job versus doing a quote unquote ministry job, church job? I think there's much to be said for excellence in how we do our job, right? Do everything for the glory of the Lord. How should I say it? It's maybe more practical than we think. I mean, you doing a good job helping someone navigate their real estate needs and serving them rather than yourself, which let's get to that just in a second here. That's a huge service. And that does capture, especially because you're doing it as a Christian, as a believer, I think that does capture the glory of the Lord in a lot of ways. You have an opportunity to care for someone, to lend a hand and guide them through a difficult process. And when you do that well, it actually works out well for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you said all that pretty well, to be honest with you.
Don't act so surprised.
No, I'm just saying you said that pretty good. I don't know if I can say it any better. It's a fun business. And I think having been in that ministry world for 5-6 years and then coming out of it thinking like, oh man, I want to do like a ministry. I don't know how this job, because I didn't grow up with a ton. I didn't have a perspective that like, I thought wealthy people or people that made a lot of money were bad. And I saw folks that were wearing suit jackets or button down shirts and stuff as like odd. And when I got into the real estate world and saw that, in fact, people that are doing this job in a lot of cases are really selfless and they take really good care of people. And by doing a really, really good job for people and serving folks really, really well, it actually translates into a decent business. Like nobody who's like a schemer or takes advantage of people, they don't stay in business very long. And I'm not saying this is every real estate agent out there by any stretch, but real estate has about an 80% turnover rate with their agents every 2 years. So right now there's somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million real estate agents out there. And if we use the 2 million number, that means 1.6 of them will be gone and out of the business in 2 years from now. And 87% of agents don't make it more than 5 years. And so this is my 10th year, and you don't have any staying power if you're doing wrong by others. You have to do right by others. So so coming out of the ministry world, thinking like, how am I going to interact with people? It probably took 5 years before I really saw how just serving folks really well and doing a good job with this service-based industry is a ministry in a way. I had a guy with I don't know what Maryland is. In Pennsylvania, it's a title company state, not an attorney state like Delaware, New Jersey. You have to have an attorney involved with the transaction. In Pennsylvania, we have title companies. And there was this guy who worked with this title company that I am a part of, and I saw him all the time. And I was in the kitchen getting a cup of coffee or something at my office, and he was like, "Why are you always smiling?" And I'm like, "Because I got Jesus in my heart, man." And he was like, "You're kidding me." And I'm like, "No, I'm dead serious. I am 100% serious with you." And he's like, "I don't get it." He's like, you can't be serious." I'm like, "I'm telling you, like, I got Jesus in my heart, you know?" And that was the first time that I realized that what I was doing could be seen as different in the way I behaved was different than maybe what a lot of people expect or interact with on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? It's how you do the thing, provided this is not an evil thing, right? Like it's not like you're like a hitman, like when we're doing tasks that are beneficial. I think one of the, if not the greatest way that we witness isn't necessarily by wearing like Jesus t-shirts at work. It's actually, how do I do my job? You know, do I do my job with excellence? And am I doing it with excellence so that I can rise up in the ranks, like up in the company? Is it for me? Or is it because I actually feel like when I do a good job, the people around me benefit and our customers benefit and, the people who I supervise are benefiting? Because that's a different motivation. And that's not necessarily present a lot in a capitalist economy, which says like, go hunt, eat, kill, eat. And like you sort of saying, hey, listen, I'm actually going to take the service route. I think how you do that, how do you sell houses? How do you guide and counsel a family who's looking to buy a house? Though is even more important in a lot of ways, than just being good at it in general. Because what that says is, hey, there's something else that's driving me, and it's not just a large bank account or a new vacation or something like that. It's it's Jesus in my heart, which says I can give myself away to you, even if you don't buy a house. And we go 3 months and see 75 homes, and you decide that it's actually wisest for your family to just rent. The way that you respond to that person, gracious or angry, like that's either a witness or it's a condemnation. And that's a really interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, you said so much there. I got so much I want to say about it, and I just hope I can gather my thoughts enough to say something here. One of the first things you said there that kind of stuck in my mind was about like how your heart is in relation to what you're doing and the disposition of your heart in the way you're interacting with other people. So I don't know what it's like in Maryland, but in southeastern PA, you can almost pick up a rock and hit a real estate agent in the head with it. Just throw it in any direction. Like there's a lot of them. I think there's like 20,000 real estate agents just in southeastern, the 5 counties in southeastern PA, and that means that sometimes people that personally use a different individual to help them with their real estate needs. And at first, that kind of got me bummed out a lot when I'd have a friend that they use somebody else. And I'd be like, oh man, what did I do? This really like, I thought we were buds, what the heck? And over time, I've come to realize that I don't need to know their reasoning. Maybe they don't feel comfortable having personal interaction, like a personal relationship in a business setting, or they don't want the person they're in a relationship with to know their finances or their business stuff. Like that's okay. Another thing I've just realized is maybe they just had a better relationship with somebody else. You can't be best buds with everybody, And when it comes to like the disposition of my heart, I know that I'm in a good place if I can have a good friend of mine work with a different real estate agent and have a transaction or multiple transactions and still in my heart be excited that they were able to do that and like genuinely happy for them and their family's well-being. And I know that if I had that happen recently, a good buddy of mine who I did Young Life with, bought and sold and did a bunch of stuff with another real estate agent who I also know really well. And at first, when I heard they were moving, I was like, hey man, just so you know, like I can help you if you need help. And we were talking about bow hunting, and he was like, yeah, I think I want to move up by you, and we can shoot bows and stuff. I'm like, yeah, awesome. Like, well, if you need real estate help too, like just let me know. I'd be happy to like sit down with you guys. He's like, no, we're going to use this other person, but appreciate it. And I had to like check myself for a second. I'm like, no, I am happy for them. And I had to like think like reflectively about my heart. And so that was the first thing that came up with what you were saying there. But yeah, it's interesting when the other thing about like talking. So I forget it was probably some monk who said like, you don't talk a lot, let your actions like preach the gospel. Who is that? A CC or somebody?
Sure.
It said preach at all times and when necessary use words. I think is the exact.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And And so when it comes to real estate stuff, I actually try not to talk about real estate. Like I just try to have genuine relationships with people. And by nature of knowing them and they know me, they know I can help them with real estate. Similarly, I think in my faith, I don't want to bombard people about my faith, but I want to live it in such a way that people are curious and ask me about it. And same thing with real estate. I want to do it with such excellence that people are curious and ask me about it or want to work with me. So I think that kind of sums up the thoughts I had with what you were saying there a minute ago.
Yeah, yeah. It's and even outside, and I'm hoping for those listening that this conversation, although for you in real estate, is applicable to any career path, right? If you're a teacher, how do you teach? What is the heart disposition for which you teach? If you're working at Vanguard, or for us down here, it's T. Rowe Price or Fidelity, what is the heart attitude that you take when you serve a client, or even just have to do sort of like the background task? Like maybe you're more on the administrative side of the workforce, and how do you do that work? Or do you do it for your boss? Do you do it for yourself, or do you do it to honor God? And something you and I have talked about, and I'm hoping you'll be a little bit vulnerable with me here, is there is a sense also in which that sometimes is unattractive in the economy sense, in the capitalist sense, because there are other things that God calls us to do. We can't be workaholics, right? We can't be full on, and say there's only one facet to my life and it's my job, and I do the best I can for the glory of God, and that means that I'm never home or caring about people outside of work, right? Like we know that can't be true. And I think you've really slowed down in the past year, and I was wondering if you would be open to sharing a little bit about how you've seen God sort of tell you, like, hey man, like you're like a dog with a ball, like that tennis ball's out there and you're going to chase, but like you need to take a minute and reflect on sort of like the whole picture of life. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think we're super in the same wavelength here, because when you said heart disposition again in the last section, I was like, man, I got to make sure these people know that I haven't done this thing right all the time. Like I haven't like had this perspective that I have now my entire career doing real estate or just in life in general. I'm not, I would like to think I'm not a super old man, but I've tried my best to like learn as the lessons came to me. But yeah, like in a business where your income is in many cases in direct proportion to the amount of time and effort you put into it. I'm 1099 self-employed. For those of you who don't know what that means, if I don't sell a house, I don't get paid. I make $0, like zero. And if I do sell a house, then I do get paid, but I don't get paid until the transaction. And in a lot of cases, that relationship window between when somebody hires you and when they consummate the transaction by going to settlement and they get the keys and everything gets handed off, that could be a year or longer. I just helped somebody buy a house 2 weeks ago, and they've been looking since 2018.
Oh my goodness!
I don't even know how many houses we saw. I couldn't even tell you. And so in to the thought process of like you eat what you kill kind of perspective, like I did that really hard. Like I'm like, hey, I'm going to put the women and children in bed. I'm going to leave the cave. I'm going to kill something. I'm going to drag it home. This is just, I literally would wake up every day. I'm going to find somebody who wants to buy and sell a house. That was all I could think about. Like I would wake up, I would sleep 4 hours, and I'd wake up and I'd go to the gym, and then I would go to the office super early, and then I would work till late at night, and then I would rinse, repeat. And over time, what that did to me physically is it gave me anxiety. And I don't even know what other implications of sleep deprivation and all this other stuff, did. And I've worked through a season of anxiety, and I'm coming out on the other side of it now. But man, every year I would like burn out. Like I would just hit the gas so hard, and the engine was just revving in the red. And by like, if, in a year, by August, I'd be fried, like crispy bacon fried. And it took me probably 7 years to figure this out. You would think like, hey buddy, don't keep banging your head against the wall and expect not to have a knot on your head, And I just realized that over time, it was becoming more about numbers and more about sales and more about dollars than it was about people. And that didn't do well for my heart. And a little bit of a backstory. At the time I was on this team, and I was there for 7 years. And by year 5, I was basically in charge of all the salespeople. So I was hiring, training all the salespeople, handling all the inbound leads, and we were doing a couple hundred transactions a year. It was a several $1 million business, and I was running all the sales of it in addition to helping my own clients buy and sell houses. And so the last year I was on that team, I sold 74 houses myself, and as a team I had eight or nine other agents I was responsible for. We sold a couple hundred transactions and a couple hundred houses, and I was just so empty. I was unwell, like just my lifestyle, my thought process. Like I would wake up and I would just undersleep, right? I didn't sleep enough, and I would super caffeinate and get all buzzed up on the day. And then I would come home and I would have to drink a lot to like slow down and just like to go to sleep, because my mind was just going a million miles an hour. And like I would wake up in the morning. It wasn't uncommon to wake up with like 4 voicemails, 15 text messages, 100 emails. And I don't know if you've been around a lot of salespeople before. It's like herding cats, plus all the chaos of their regular lives. And so I was responsible for all that. And I was just burnt, man. And so I ended up leaving that team that I was on, and it was great. I mean, I was 27 years old, in charge of a multi-million-dollar business that, like I had a lot of responsibility and a lot of people that were sort of riding on me, but like my soul was like dying, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And so it wasn't an abrupt thing. I started the conversation probably 9 months before I left, but like we talked every week. The guys who own the team, my business partners and I, we talked probably every week for months to try to like figure it out. And it just kept coming back to like, I'm just going to keep doing the same thing because they're not going to make me stop, because I was making them a lot of money. And, I was like the golden goose, kind of thing. And I eventually came to them. This is probably September of 3 years ago, maybe 2021. And I was like, guys, I can't do this anymore. Like I need to stop, and I'm going to leave. And here's a 3-month exit plan. I had to by the day for 90 days, what I was going to do to transition off. And we scheduled 2 hours for this meeting. And it was like 25 minutes into the meeting, I said everything I need to say. And I was like, what do you guys like? Have any questions or anything you want to talk about? And they were like, no, you can go. And so I was like, okay. Well, I went to my computer, grabbed my computer, and I was just thinking like, all right, well, 90 days to transition off. And I was about to go on a 2-week hunting trip in North Dakota or Wyoming or something. And I'm driving home 30 minutes after this, and I start getting phone calls from all the sales agents I was responsible for on this team. They're like, dude, we're so sorry to see you go. And I hadn't told anybody other than the people I just met with. And I was like, what do you mean? And this is by like call number 4. I was like, what's going on? I was like, what do you know? And they were like, well, the guys who own the team, they told us that you were leaving and that you had 2 weeks. And I was like, wait a second. And so then the 5th call I got was from one of my business partners. He was like, hey, we talked about it and we decided, we love you, but we decided we need to control the narrative. We have this big business here and you have a bunch of people, like a lot of power essentially. And we don't want you to like tank this thing. And they knew me well enough to know that I wouldn't personally do that, but unintentionally probably. And they were like, so instead of 90 days, we're going to give you 2 weeks. And that'll be that. And keep in mind, I hadn't planned for this. I was leaving the next day on a 2-week, hunting trip. I was going to be in the mountains, no phone, no nothing. So I didn't have business cards. I didn't have my database, which is like your contacts basically that get housed in a CRM. I didn't have yard signs. I didn't even know how to do a bunch of stuff because I had, multiple assistants throughout this whole time. And I'm like, dang, well, this is going to be a big leap of faith. And I'm like, God, same thing as when I got into the business. I'm like, I'm going to trust you into it. I'm going to trust you out of it, and if that means I fail, I guess I'll go back to carrying logs all day for the tree guy. I don't need to do this, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it my way where it's just people. I'm not going to buy a bunch of internet leads. I'm just going to serve people and do it really, really well. And if that means I fail, that's okay. If that means I succeed, that's okay too. And it worked out.
Yeah. I mean, it's so important, I think, to hear you share that, because we kind of glorify work, we glorify success, and that's not like something like particularly wicked about us. I think it's just a natural thing as humans to long to be successful. I mean, to be successful is a good thing at the end of the day, but to make something that's good into an ultimate is when idolatry occurs, right? And like that's where we start to serve something that is meant to be from God for a benefit for us, when we make that thing an ultimate thing, we've replaced God, the giver, with whatever that thing is. And, we do that with sex, we do that with money, we do that with work. We do it all the time. It's just what we do. But to sort of hear the way that God brought to your attention, honestly, through a lot of your physical struggle, like you saying, like needing to caffeinate all the time and not getting enough sleep, and the toll that it was taking on your body. I mean, those are signs that we often will say in America, like, yeah, you just got to push through. Duck just needs to push through. He's not tough enough. And it's like, yeah, that's just bad advice. And there's a lot of guys, and I don't need to name their names, who have big podcasts out there, and that's just kind of their whole mantra is like, embrace the suck, like push through it. And I think that's where the gospel really has to be the lead push for us, which says nothing I do will ever make enough of a difference that my heart's going to be satisfied. No amount of sex that I can acquire for myself is ever going to make me feel like a man. No amount of money that I make is ever going to fill my heart to full. No amount of success in work will ever do that either, because it can't. It was never intended to do that. It was, only God, only Jesus is. And so to be able to sort of say, man, I'm living in a way that, although very successful financially and successful career, is not actually, it's not pleasing to the Lord to be doing that. And to say, so I'm taking this risk almost in obedience and in humility to say, let's see what God does out here. And, he's blessed you out there on your own, with your own business as well. And that's been really, really good. And, as your friend, I got to say, dude, I'm really proud of you. That was a huge step. I remember talking to you during that decision and just kind of watching you process and feel the tension. And, that was difficult, and you made a good decision. And I'm just really excited, because in a world that wants to, we have superstar worship all the time, right? With our athletes and with successful business people all the time, pastors all the time. And it's like, hey, yeah, listen, life's more than a scorecard. My life belongs to Jesus, and I'm going to do whatever I do to the best of my ability for Jesus. And I don't think Jesus wants us working 100 hours a week, perpetually, and getting 4 hours of sleep. And, that sort of idolatrous grind is just not good. So, brother, I just appreciate you, man. Hey, listen, with a little bit of time we have left, I'm just going to turn.
Listen, I can talk as long as you want.
I know. Trust me, I know. This. Yeah, I never doubt how long you can talk, Ducky. That is one of your spiritual gifts, and mine is encouragement. Not really. Well, listen, let's change topic a little bit here. I want to talk about the state of the real estate market. Obviously, this is going to be a little more local to the Mid-Atlantic, but we do have young families, a lot of young families, people who are in that diapers stage of the 4Ds. They're married, and maybe their family's growing. Kate and I were laughing, my wife, because our small group is not a small group anymore. I mean, we have 7 families, which is pretty big for a small group, but we have like 22 kids under the age of 5 in our small group. So we basically have like our own little like nursery church going on, once a month. But these families, like, we're growing and we're looking around, we're saying that we need to buy a bigger house, perhaps. What's out there for us? What are some of the things that you see? And then maybe as a last question is, how do we pick a good real estate agent?
Oof, man, you're throwing it all at me.
Get hot.
Yeah. I was just cracking up at the small group, man. I don't even know if you meet the ratio for adults to children allowed for a daycare in that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So starting from the top on this. So Mid-Atlantic real estate market. So I think from what you've told me about the greater DC region, Baltimore, DC region, is a very, very expensive area to live in a very fast moving market. So I think it would probably be safe to compare that to the southeastern PA, Philadelphia suburb market that I'm in, because it's pretty expensive. and it's pretty fast moving. So like we'll just kind of keep that analogy in mind here. So in this area, since about 2019, the number of available homes has decreased on average between 10 and 20% per year. Okay. So round numbers, 4 years, 40% less inventory if we have the lower side of that estimate. So that means for every 10 homes there were to choose from, there are now 6 homes to choose from. Conversely, you have a significant number of people, I don't know the exact math on this, that since COVID decided they don't want to be in an apartment. They don't want to be in an 800 square foot flat in the city. They don't want to be without a yard. They want to have a dog. They want some space. And what that has caused is in a lot of city type populations, folks to want to go to the suburbs. So in your suburb area, in my suburb area, there was a big influx of buyers that weren't in the market, very well qualified, educated, good jobs, good money, type of buyers coming into the market. So what you have is less inventory. You have higher number of buyers, so low supply, high demand. And what that's caused is the prices to increase year over year since about 2019, 2020 as well. Now, in our area, what we would consider is an average appreciation of somewhere between 3 and 5% per year. $300,000 this year for a house is worth, $315 next year, 5%, right? 5 times 3, 315. What happened with COVID is those numbers, that average appreciation of 5% per year for round numbers was like 20% per year for 2-3 years. So this year the house was 300. COVID hit, that house was then 360 in 2021, and then 450 in 2022. And you have this exponential, what felt like an exponential increase of price without the exponential increase of income. And so you have the people who are well qualified to buy the houses were buying them. And that caused a lot of people to feel like, what the heck, I'm left behind. And there's a really strong tension right now to just kind of be super straightforward is you have a lot of people who want to buy a house that don't know how they're going to afford to buy a house in today's hyper competitive, hyper expensive, and in some ways hyper inflated market. There's not really any indicators that I'm aware of that the interest rates are going to dip to where they were during COVID. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to buy right now. The interest rates are 7%. We're in springtime of 2024. And I'm going to wait till they go back to where they were during COVID, which was 2.5%, 3% at one point. For every $300,000 you borrow, what's on your mortgage, $300,000, every 1% interest rate change is about $250 difference in your monthly payment. So round numbers, 3% interest versus 7% interest with a $300,000 mortgage, your payment is $1,000, 4% higher, $250 for every 1% interest, $1,000 higher than it was at 3% for no other reason other than what you're paying in interest. And people are like, I'm just going to wait for them to go back. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. And so when I'm sitting down with folks and, they have ideas of what things will be in the future, I thought I was going to be sleeping on the beach and be a tree guy when I was 22, making $30,000 a year as a social worker or, first time youth min guy. And it didn't work out that way for me. God's the only one that knows the future. And that includes the interest rates and that includes the real estate market. So if you could find something to buy today that's in your budget, I would buy it.
Let's talk about that for just 1 second. That in your budget, when you're talking to these families, how do you help them set a budget, right? Because I think there's some sense in which, a lot of mortgage, companies are going to let you go as far as you possibly can, right? But that's not necessarily always useful or helpful.
It's a great question. So I try not to tell people what to do in anything. I want to give people enough information to make an informed, comfortable, confident decision. And so when we sit down, I sit down with everybody before they see any houses, before we put their house on the market, before anything. I sit down with them and we have a consultation. And so we look at what the houses that they're wanting to buy are in the area, what the market's doing, the process of buying, as well as their budget. And we'll look at, okay, what do you want your monthly payment to be? And then we talk to the lender and make sure that fits into the budget. So for round numbers, for conventional financing, typically you have to be about 46% or less of your take home pay going out towards monthly payments. Okay. So for super round numbers, $100 a month, you're bringing home, you have $46, sometimes $50 a month that you can be putting out towards any type of revolving debt, student loans, car loans, credit cards, mortgage payments. And in this case right now is the biggest kind of weird thing is student loan payments, because that counts, that bites into that. So if you have $25 a month in this example going out towards a student loan payment, you only have 25 additional dollars, maybe 21 additional dollars you can put out towards a mortgage payment. And that's the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, and then an HOA fee if it applies. And so people don't always know this. So it's a lot of education. And when you go out and you start seeing these houses, you have this idea in your head. It's kind of like a funnel. Right now, when you're starting on a process, it's wide. You have these ideas. It's like a cloud. And as you start seeing more things, it starts narrowing down. You start realizing, oh, what I can get for my monthly payment budget, my out-of-pocket budget in this area isn't exactly reflective of the type of house that I originally thought I would see myself in. And so it really kind of is a trial and error thing a little bit. Education is really important. To kind of jump ahead to one thing, if you call a real estate agent and they just say like, great, let's go see some houses, and you don't get a mortgage pre-approval from a reputable local mortgage lender, you don't have a consultation, you have no idea what you're even doing, and they're just running around showing you houses, you might get set up to fail there. You might want to start reevaluating that a little bit. But I really want to sit down with people, make sure they know what they're getting into so that they're happy. Because it really does me no good if I have unhappy clients. I have a referral-based business. If they're not happy with me, I won't have any future business. So I want to make sure they do. They have all the information and they do the right thing for themselves now, and they'll appreciate that in the long run, even if at the moment, in the present, it doesn't feel good. So to like a first-time home buyer, growing family type situation, more directly to your point in the thing earlier, is like if you can find something that's in your budget today, buy it. But think about it not as a forever home. A forever home doesn't exist. I can't tell you how many people I've sold houses to, and they're like, oh, this is my dream home. This is my forever home. And then 2 years later, I get another call. We saw another forever home. And then I get another call 2 years later. We saw another forever home, and I've helped people, they'll buy 4 forever homes. And I'm like, this is crazy. But think about it more as a stepping stone. This is a forced savings plan. I'm going to buy this house. I'm going to pay down what I owe. I'm going to continue to save money. I'm going to continue to make more money, hopefully with my job, because I'm doing a good job and my income will go up over time. And someday, I might have enough budget to buy something that I ideally would like to be in. I'm on my third or fourth house, and we did the exact same thing. Before I got married, I bought a very small condo in a not so ideal area, but I knew I would prefer not to rent if I could help it, if I found something in my budget, but I was okay to rent. Renting's not the worst thing in the world, as long as you don't do it forever. You don't want to, pay a landlord. You want to be able to pay yourself a little bit, by owning a home. But I bought this condo and we got married. And when you buy a house before you're married, you have to be prepared that it might not be what your wife wants, after you get married. So I learned that one. And then we got a different house that we bought, and it went up in value as well. It was a little bit better of an area. It was a little bit bigger. And then this is over like a 6-year period. I'm describing this. We were there for 4 or 5 years. And then about a year and a half ago, we moved into a home that we ideally would want to be in. I would caution people about real estate investing. A lot of people have the perspective of oh, I'm going to buy this property and then I'm going to move out and I'm going to rent it out and I'm going to make $200 a month every month in rent. I've done that. I've done some real estate investing, and it's not all it's cracked up to be, and it's not passive. It's right. Very active. You got to deal with tenants. You got to deal with leaks. You got to deal with all this other stuff. And if you're only making a couple $100 a month or a year, and then the HVAC system goes out, who's paying for that? That falls on you. So you want to have some margin there. So I ended up selling the 2 other investment properties we had, the 2 other properties, and rolling all of the equity into my current home. And, I really, a goal of mine, I'd really like to pay off my house as quick as I can, because then I have more freedom. specifically more freedom with my finances, but that alleviates a lot of pressure in my business. Because if I have no pressure of selling anything, I'm completely unattached to the outcome of the transaction. I can give really, really solid advice because I have no skin in the game. It doesn't matter to me if you close on the house or not, but so I can give you better advice. So I feel like I've been rambling here for a while.
No, I mean, that's all really, really helpful. I think, at the end of the day, if I can synthesize and summarize, what I would say is this: when we're thinking about buying a house, we want to get our facts straight first. And that looks like, kind of what you do usually is sit down and have that consultation. And I think point number 2 is very connected and correlated, which is when we're looking for a real estate, professional, we're looking for a coach. We're looking for someone who's going to walk us through the process and not jump straight to the sale. And so I think those 2 things are super practical, super helpful takeaways for our young families. Ducky, we really could talk for hours, and it'd be fun. But I know that we're running to time here. But thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. Thanks for encouraging us with what God has revealed to you in your heart and in your life. And I'm just very glad that we made this work. And I know that our folks are going to be blessed from hearing you. Are there I'll ask you this afterwards, but I'm going to put some links in the show notes below. These are links. I'm going to put one, which is called Every Good Endeavor. It's a book from Tim Keller, and it's about sort of this idea of like, what does it mean to have a job as a Christian? How do I use my job as a way to glorify God? And kind of the first half of our conversation. But, I'm also going to ask Ducky to send me some resources. Just if you're out there and you're thinking about making a big decision like this, there's a lot of, I think you said, knowing what the facts are is really important. And so we'll put some links down there, just resources that'll help you sort of come to some of those decisions on your own. But Ducky, any closing words for our folks as we wrap up?
Yeah. When it comes to resources, I guess with real estate, I'll send some to you for that. And then if anybody's thinking about getting into the business as well, I mean, it's a really hard business, but it's a really good business. And it really has changed my life in a big way. I had never dreamed of doing anything that I'm doing now and what I've accomplished and all that stuff. It was never even on the radar. So, I'm sure that there's somebody out there that, might listen to this who's like, you know what? I think I want to try this out. And if you have the right coaching in your corner and you're maybe stubborn enough to stick through some of the hard things, like maybe I was, it could be a really good opportunity maybe to benefit your life. So I wouldn't just like limit it to only buying or selling a house. But I would say if you just Google me, all my contact information's on the internet. Feel free to call me, send me an email, things like that. Totally cool with all that. Don't send me anything on social media. I won't check any of it. And I would say if there was something I wanted to impart to like first time home buyers, if there was one thing I wanted to tell them, I would tell them that there's 4 things that people who buy houses never regret. They never regret saving money. They never regret paying off debt. They never regret being patient, and they never regret sticking to their gut feelings. And that's very countercultural in a lot of different ways. In the easy button, rack it up to the wheels fall off, do it now. It doesn't matter if it feels wrong, do it anyway. It's complete opposite of that. So take your time, save as much money as you can, pay off as much debt as you can, be as patient as you can. And if something doesn't feel right, don't do it.
Yeah, that's great, man. Well, thanks, Ducky. And listen, guys, it's been a great interview, and I hope it's been a blessing to you. And we will catch you again next week with another episode of In the Fire. Until then, this is Rob signing off.